What's going on, guys? I'm Dan Newton and this is Behind the Chalkboard. In today's world, education establishments are run just like businesses, and I've made it my mission to meet the people behind the scenes and dig deep into what it really takes to make a successful education business. If you think you'd be a good guest, drop me an email at dn@charlesgarth.com. Enjoy the episode. Mate, thanks for coming on.
It's quite all right.
Obviously, the whole podcast is to find a bit more about the people within the world of education, really. So, there's lots of different podcasts and different conversations go on about the teaching side of it. How can we improve the curriculum, everything else? And the reason I wanted to create this was to really dig deep into the business side of it. It's it's a big money business, in all honesty, lots of money flying about. But I want to go back to your story, really, your journey into education and, what you did in the early days before you found yourself involved with the industry.
Okay, well, it's quite interesting that it's taken me 20-odd years in the industry to be asked that question, because I've always said there's no sort of defined educational route into education estates management. There's never been anything predetermined or anything that you can a path that you can follow. All my peers, people that I meet in our groups, our get-togethers and things like that, they're all either ex-plumbers or they're ex-architects or something, So I'm in that group. I'm a failed QS. I'm one of the worst QSs ever. So that's why I ended up in estates. But yeah, in terms of my sort of career path then, I left school. I was always practically minded, and it's still another bugbear of me going about education, that the more practically minded students tend to get a little bit left behind. So I left school very early. I didn't go to sixth form. Started working for a really small little builder at 16. I left school. And it were a fantastic grounding into the construction industry, because back then in the mid-90s, anything went. Health and safety was quite low on a lot of small firms' agendas. And some of the things I were getting up to at that firm, clambering up ladders and chucking cat ladders over roof ridges and putting flue liners down at 16, 17-year-old, it'd be unheard of now, thankfully. But yeah, started off as a 16-year-old for a little construction company, learnt a lot there, hell of a lot. We had a small contract looking after some local authority properties. As I say, worked with some great people, really interesting start, and then quickly realised that I didn't want to spend freezing cold winters out on site, and it were getting a little bit tough as I got into my late teens, and thought I need to sort of progress a little bit here and get into office where it's warm, and thought I need to expand my education a little bit. So I did something called a BTEC at Leeds College of Building. Did that sort of part-time while I were working, and then ended up getting sort of half poached a little bit by a QS practice. So I was looking after a small construction site of about 10 houses in Drax near the power station, and a chap called Marc Matthews, who's still a good pal of mine, really nice fella. He was a quantity surveyor and said, look, you've got a little bit of nous, a little bit about you. Do you fancy joining our practice as a junior? And back then, a QS could sort of earn decent money. You were nice and warm in the office, and I thought, I'm still in construction. This is great. So I joined a really small QS practice, and then again realised that you sort of hit a ceiling without that level of education that you needed. So went to university part-time, which they paid for, which firms used to do then, day release type of thing. So it took me a lot longer to become a fully qualified QS. No sooner had I qualified as a quantity surveyor, I realised I didn't like it. It was more like a construction accountant, and I was getting further and further away from the actual stuff that were happening on site. We were doing these really exciting projects. We did North Street in Leeds City Centre when all the flats were going up in the early 2000s, and I was just doing valuations and things, and this is boring. I don't like this. I thought I've spent 3 or 4 years learning how to be a QS, and I've just realised I don't like it. So I ended up. They were starting an FM arm up with a little company that I was working for, and they said, "Does anyone want to fancy a little turn with the FM side that were being set up?" And I said, "Yeah, me, definitely." And that's what kind of piqued my interest in maintenance and FM and things like that. We had some union buildings, really small contract, and all of a sudden it were dealing with contractors and organising specifications and things like that. This is brilliant. This were it. Yeah. And that was sort of early 20s, I think. I'd had a couple of stints working away in Madrid as a QS for that firm, and then sort of settled on FM and maintenance. Loved it. So I didn't stay there very long. Worked for a couple of different companies, and then ended up with the NHS, and worked there for 9 years with a chap who I owe a lot to, a chap called Sean Hancock, who was an ex-painter for Sheffield Council, randomly. Ended up in the same boat as me. He was estates manager. I think I was estates project manager or something, and we worked for what was Interserve then, for the NHS.
Actually, they had a big contract, didn't they?
They did. We had 9 mental health hospitals, and we did all the project improvement work, all the maintenance, and just learned so much from Sean himself, who was learning himself as well, and we got a bit of a siege mentality going. We had a great rapport, and throughout your career you try and learn from these people. You try, that's the best bit of advice I can give, because I'm still learning now from people that I work with all the time. But Sean was quite formative and taught me a hell of a lot about how to conduct yourself at work and the basics of the industry. So I spent a long time with him, and then having sort of got my grounding done, in my late 20s, moved into education. With a really small local academy, understood the principles and the basic understanding of estates management and building care and things like that. But it was a real eye opener to work in education, because the work is similar in a lot of ways, because in our mental health hospitals we were dealing with really sort of troubled service users that would cause a lot of damage to the buildings, and we had to come up with innovative ways to try and make sure the building was robust, and they couldn't harm themselves. I remember walking into work with Sean one morning, and we got the news that a service user had attempted to hang himself from a fire alarm, a smoke detector on the roof in one of our hospitals, and it was okay. They got him. He was fine. But we then realised that we'd been through all the rooms and looked at magnetic coat hooks and things, and taps had to be anti-ligature and things like that. But the one thing we hadn't considered, nobody had considered throughout these buildings were 8-9 years old, was the smoke detectors, and they were fixed into a timber roof, a solid roof. Yeah. So alongside ADT, I think that were our company at the time, we had to come up with a design to make these magnetic bases that was wheeled out right across the 9 hospitals, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it was just that sort of ability to be reactive that you had to learn. Yeah. You had to sort of pick up and think, how are we going to make these? How are these buildings going to be safe for the users of the buildings? Now they're going to be practical for them as well. So a lot of that I took into education. And as I say, I ended up at a small academy which grew. I grew that estates function to, I think at last count we had 12 schools. Started off with one. And had all sorts of issues around, which a lot of estates managers will have, funding. And I think it's getting better, but the estates function, or the caretaking role, if you like, wasn't really modernised for a long time. You had a lot of key swinging caretakers who lived in the bungalow, who opened the building up, waxed the whole floor during the summer, locked up on a night, and that was it.
Yeah.
And with the creation of academies, that Crown immunity goes, so all they're susceptible to all the same rules and building regulations that any public building would be liable to. And I think that caught a lot of CEOs and a lot of head teachers off guard. Hence why I had to make some really sweeping changes.
So you would have so all the experience you had, you were bringing this into a place that had pretty much zero.
That's it.
And that's like, you're probably coming here thinking we're missing so much, how we're not doing half as much as what we should be doing.
Correct.
So that's a huge shift then for the school or the academy then.
And you know, the lack of realisation that they were at risk.
Yeah.
You know, notwithstanding the conditions of the buildings, you know, the inherited asbestos stock and things like that, where there's just been a really simple due diligence done. It's much better now.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're talking 15 years ago or whatever, where a building that had been looked after by a local authority with diminishing funds every year had then been handed over to an academy. All they'd thought about was the education side of it.
Yeah.
The building itself falling through to bits, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're then starting to look at what external funding streams, what can we get hold of to make improvements and stuff. And I latched on to something called CIF, which is the Condition Improvement Fund, which is a government issued fund, which everyone will know about now. But back in the day, it was a little bit unknown, and I put 3 or 4 successful bids together to refurbish science labs, classrooms, new roofs, asbestos removal, things like that, and had to sort of learn on the fly and try and become an education estates manager, of which there's no real blueprint. You know.
Did you? So there was no training. So you were literally brought in using the past experience to then just head it up, literally. So that must have put you in a lot of pressure then, because there's a lot going on within an education setup that will be priority for the school. There is,
and a lot of it is about perception. Was a lot about perception then, because you know I arrived in a shirt and trousers and wanting to appoint contractors and get some statutory maintenance in place, and I was getting phone calls to someone's been sick in toilets. You know, grab a bucket and stuff. Thinking,
getting dragged into everything.
Yeah, well, I don't mind doing it, but you know, this is so a lot of those early years at that academy was spent sort of trying to be strategic and getting all the contractors and completing statutory maintenance, and then getting my tool bag out and repairing toilets. And
you were a handyman. You were an advanced handyman, ultimately.
Absolutely, yeah, without a doubt. And to my detriment, I quite enjoy that.
Did you? I was just going to say, so you'd gone from, I mean, it's that journey in construction then, when you found yourself in that education setup, did you enjoy it? Were you really enjoying them first?
I loved it.
You loved it?
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely great. And I get told off for it nowadays. If I'm caught fixing something now, I get told off by my CEO. You know, she's like, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, you've got to be strategic and what have you. And I nod and smile and sort of do it on the quiet.
Get your screwdriver back out and fix the toilet.
She has found me on a roof once or twice, but we'll gloss over that. So a lot of the time was spent sort of, I suppose, transforming from this hybrid kind of handyman / estates manager and trying to have a hat in both camps, you know, get mucked in with the lads, because a lot of the staff that I inherited, they were cleaners basically. They didn't have a grasp on, and it's no detriment to them at all, but they didn't have a grasp on being a maintenance operative and how to complete PPMs and things like that. So I developed a planned preventative maintenance schedule for them to follow. We got together the statutory maintenance and got some good contractors in place and sort of pulled it together, and that's what led us to get a little bit of a reputation for schools to start then joining. At one point, the estates function was the only bit that the 12 schools were buying into from that particular academy. And then I made a fist of it there, and were pleased with my efforts. I was a bit concerned that I was becoming a bit of a house cat. Yeah. And thinking I'm a bit of a one-trick pony here. And decided I had an opportunity to work somewhere. I don't know if I should be talking about this too much, because I had to sign the Official Secrets Act to join, but I'd always wanted to work at Menwith Hill, right? And got an opportunity to work there, completely out of the blue, and I've been obsessed with it. But I love it; it's great. It's fantastic construction, and and got an opportunity to work there. And it's one of these situations, sort of don't meet your heroes type of thing, because when I were leaving, I had the opportunity to either join Menwith Hill or rejoin the NHS, but not through Interserve, not through a PFI contractor, direct to the NHS, but for the same contract, so almost poacher turn gamekeeper type of thing. And both really good offers, but I couldn't turn down Menwith Hill. I really wanted to work there. I thought, this is going to be fascinating, this is going to be amazing, I'm going to see all sorts of stuff, Boring as all. Absolutely terrible. You won't believe it. It was just dull as dishwater. Was it? It was, and I thought, what have I done here?
So you'd left then. You'd made the leap. You'd gone in.
I'd gone as construction. I think it was construction director for not the Ministry of Defence, but their kind of in-house contractor that did all their stuff for the Ministry of Defence. And horrendous move. One of those where I just thought, what have I done? But thought, I've made my bed, I'm going to have to sleep in it. I'd not been there long, and the NHS rung me back and said, look, we haven't managed to appoint after we offered you the role. How's it going at Menwith Hill type of thing? Because I'd been honest. I told them, my situation. And I said, do you know what? I said, it's not going great. They said, well, it's still available if you fancy it. So I ended up jumping back in with the NHS. Went back to the NHS again for the same contract, but direct for the NHS. I had a great time there again, met some lovely people. They were going through a bit of a transitional period. Again, a legacy of people who've been there a long, long time and not sort of equipped themselves for the modern world. Got involved in a really good project, which were the building of the Red Kite View Hospital, which is a huge brand new mental health facility. And obviously a lot of my mental health experience from the previous stint at the NHS came to the fore there, which were good. And then once that was finished, made probably the best move of my career so far, which is joining BDAT, which is Bradford Diocesan Academies Trust.
Which is where you're at now.
Which is where I'm at now. I've been here nearly 3 years, I think, as head of estates. Yep. And we've got a cracking sort of CEO in place. She's brilliant. I'm not just saying that, Carol, but you are really good. Quite a sort of modern, forward-thinking trust. Yeah. That has an eye on development, understands the importance of statutory maintenance. Yep. It's I've always looked after multiple buildings, and it's always tricky. You think it's going to be easier looking after loads of buildings, but you can really put your stamp on one. When you're in one building and you're there every day and you see everything, you can have it how you want it. You can get things running exactly how you want, and it's a different challenge doing that across even 2 buildings, never mind 21, I think, which I've got now. And it's not something that you can do overnight. Maintenance itself isn't, it's infinite. You can never complete it, you know. And uniformity, I think, is key. And I think trying to get uniformity across 21 schools is a challenge. It's one that I'm on with at the minute, and I've made inroads into. But it is tricky because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with individuals, and you're dealing with people that have run their school how they've run it for 20 years in some cases, you know. And you find within education, and I'm sure other people have found this as well, that it can be quite an insular environment sometimes, you know. And there's a lack of awareness sometimes about what's going on in the outer construction world. And it's not an ignorance, it's just that you don't know what you don't know. And I've been there, you know. It's
well, if you go back to the situation at the hospital with the hanging situation, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Until it happens.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And that happens in construction all the time.
Yeah.
You know, with things like Grenfell and everything, you don't know, you know, what you don't know. And we learn every day. And I guess that's exactly the same in your position now.
Absolutely. And I think if you think you know it all, you've had it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I you know, I've never professed to be the best in any of my jobs, but I've always tried to pick stuff up from people, and I think that's really important. Yeah. And you know, as I say, sort of when you're trying to implement uniformity across your trust, it's more about winning hearts and minds as well than just getting the right contractor to do the right job and comply with the Health and Safety at Work Act and things like that. It's, you know, the business manager or the head teacher at one primary school might have used a certain plumber that lives 2 doors down for 20 years, and they've never let me down. They come out when it's snowing, and when we had a breakdown at Christmas, they come out Christmas Eve and which is brilliant. You need that in a school. You need a reactive response. Yep. But you also need to be compliant. And it's balancing that expectation really, which has been really tricky. And I think, you know, a lot of my colleagues find it tricky as well. But we are getting there, you know. And we found that the biggest benefit is financial as well. Yeah. If you can create some uniformity, not just in contractors, but in the materials that you're using. You know, we've done some research on LED lights recently, and we use the same LED lights now right across the street. If a light goes out, that's the one that we use. You can then start to buy them. Your buying power's increased. Yeah. You know, it's a basic thing, but it's an important step towards, I think, effective multiple site estates management. And yeah, that's sort of where I am now at the moment. So
it's a journey. It's a good journey because we've never actually spoke about it in depth. You know, I think I've always known that you've had a bit in the NHS, but I think just in general construction, even like myself, it's once you kind of get into the arena, it's such a great place. You know, what you're doing ultimately is a construction work. You know, I know you're in an education establishment, but what I found with construction, it's like the reason I'm still in it is just because of the people. You meet so many different people, so many different challenges. It's so different every day. And
there's nobody works. You know, I've worked alongside nurses and doctors, and they're brilliant people, amazing. There's nobody works harder than a teacher, honestly. Yeah. And you know, your kids at same, my little kids go to school, and one's at primary school, or just left primary school, and one's at high school. And my missus is on these WhatsApp groups, you know, and they're having a go, you know, I don't know what's going on today. Little Johnny's had a right telling off because of what. These teachers just put up with so much, and the pay they get is ridiculous. They work every hour God sends. There's some really dedicated people in education sector, brilliant people. And, you know, like I explained to my team, we as an estates function, it's not about us. We should be like ninjas, you know. We're only seen or heard if there's a problem, if there's a light out or heating's not working or something. As far as I'm concerned, we should not be seen. There's never any glory in it. You don't get in it for the glory whatsoever. As long as everything's working and nobody knows who you are, that's a result as far as I'm concerned. If everyone knows who you are and is ringing you every 2 minutes, something's going wrong.
Probably.
So it's always been about making sure that the function is, and the estate is safe, warm, well lit. Kids are able to learn. When I went to school, I was learning in porter cabins in car park. And I strongly believe that the environment that a kid is learning in goes a long way to how they perform in school.
Yeah.
If they're freezing and it's dim yellow phosphorescent lighting, and it's not a place you want to go. It's not something that's appealing. You're going to think, all right, great, I'm going to have a good day today or whatever. I think it's really important. I always have done. And I think if we can provide that as an estates function, and again, be seen and not heard, I think you're doing something right then,
Yeah, absolutely. I remember just you give me a thought, back when at my primary school, I went to a school called Hobmore in York, and it was literally made of metal. Yeah. They called it the tin can school. Yeah. I remember the big old radiators, and it was just pumping heat out all day long.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how are we going to survive being here? But they've come such a long way. But just on that, on the functioning of it then, when we first met, I remember I speak to a lot of different estate managers, lots of different business managers, etc. And the strategy is so mixed across the board. And I did a talk not so long ago at the Schools North East session where you're talking about how do you get a good mix between reactive and planned maintenance. And the DFE guidelines actually tell you, if you have 75% planned and 25% reactive, you're in a good model.
Yep.
We're seeing schools with 100% reactive, and they're caught in this loop of trying to get out of it.
Yes.
They need their entire funding to keep them functioning.
Yep.
And I did basically it was a talk about how you can transition.
Yep.
And it's been brave, and you've got to be able to stand in front of all these teachers, in front of all these CEOs, CFOs, and be brave.
Yep.
But sometimes that falls on deaf ears. Like you said, you've got an amazing CEO that understands the strategy, yet some estate managers have got a CEO that has, they're saying, I don't care.
Not interested.
Curriculum is what's important. The rest will pick up. With what you've created, do you think there should be, I guess, a blanket strategy? Because I guess a lot of them are as well, ex-caretakers coming in. And so how do you think you fix that?
I completely agree with you. Just when I first started at my first school, there was something called a lamp day.
Right, okay, not heard of that.
Where I watched them do it. I was sat at my desk and I watched two caretakers with a load of tubes on one shoulder and a ladder on the other. And I says, what are you doing? Oh, off lamping. All right, okay. I went and observed what they were doing, right? And they spent an entire day replacing lights, right? Just barging into classrooms. Yeah, we're just fixing that. Kids teaching, what have you, putting lights up, walking out. And you're absolutely right in that the old way of working would be to sit on your hands until something breaks, then you go repair it. And trying to change that attitude is like trying to turn the Titanic.
Yeah.
But you've got to start somewhere. And from my NHS days, linked with something called SGF 20, me and Sean developed a PPM strategy, which, although you tailor it to the buildings, it's pretty basic, and it looks at things like gutter clearances and light checks. What about checks? Emergency light checks, fire alarm tests. There's a whole list of stuff, maybe 12, 15 items in a primary school or something that happen throughout the year. And I've lived by this for the past 15, 20 years, and it's worked every single time. And I've implemented it at every school I've been in, and it's taken 12 months to implement and to change that mindset from, right, let's just wait for the phone to ring, to actually get up out of your chair and go check something.
Yep.
And I work by the principle of the three loops. So the caretaker's sat in his chair, his PPM falls due, and let's say it's his light check, general light check. So he gets up out of his chair, he goes and checks the building, sees that all the lights are working, great, ticks that off, closes that off on whatever CAFM system that you've got, or it used to be paper-based for us, but now it's CAFM system. Loop 2, he gets up out of his chair, he goes and does that proactive check. He finds 2 lights out, head teacher's office and classroom 1. So he goes back to his stores, he goes and gets 2 lights, might be on click roses, boom, 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 fixed, done. That's loop 2 closed. So he's closed the loop. He's done the check, he's found the fault, and he's repaired it. Each time you're opening a loop and each time you're closing it. The third loop, he gets up out of his chair, he goes and does that proactive check, finds 2 faults. He can repair the head teacher's light, but he can't repair the classroom light. There's something wrong with it. It's transformer's gone or whatever. There's limitations to what you can afford in terms of staff. Yeah. So we don't expect them to be electricians and gas fitters and everything. So that's fine. It needs a contractor. So that's loop 3. You need to involve a contractor. So that gets noted on your CAFM system. You ring your contractor comes in, he gives you your installation certificate, your completion certificate. That gets uploaded to your CAFM system. That's loop 3 closed. So that's the only 3 loops that you're ever going to need. And that applies to every piece of planned preventative maintenance that we do in the schools at the moment. So it applies to gutter clearances, to Legionella testing, fire alarm testing, everything. Exact same principle. We do a fire door check. Exact same principle. You check all the fire doors in the school. You find 2 faults. If you can't repair them, you involve a contractor. You keep closing the loop every single time, because it's easy to go around a school and find fault and create a list. Yeah. And that's where it used to die. But the trick is to make sure that you are finding those faults and getting them repaired, either in-house or via the correct contractor.
Being super efficient. You are. No, to be fair, we've sat down and talked about your strategy, and you're definitely ahead of the game. I think a lot of people can learn from this, and I think, if people are listening and stuff, they can 100% reach out. And obviously we've created what we call the Thought Leader Group. It's to have these conversations, because what you're doing, not everyone's doing that. And sometimes it's just getting that little bit of advice saying, oh, Mark's doing it this way, maybe we could implement something. But talking on efficiency, I'm going to move it on just a little bit, because you've been obviously quite busy on the side building a new business. Is that right?
Yes. So I don't want this to turn into an advert.
Absolutely not. But you've told me about this, and it's super exciting, and I think it's amazing. And I just think through what you've spoke about there, even just being efficient, what you've created is exactly that. So the floor's yours.
Okay. So throughout my career, and I think a lot of people have experienced this in the construction industry in general, there's been a hell of a lot of waste, and obviously sustainability is a massive issue for everybody who does any sort of construction work in this country at the moment, and the world probably. I remember starting, back on sites at 16 years old, throwing things away into a skip that I thought, and I'm pretty sure it's not me being some sort of eco-friendly sustainability guru. It's more about me being a tight Yorkshireman. Because I hate waste, I hate the kids leaving the bathroom light on. So I've always thought, this is too good to throw away. What can we do with this? And I've always been told, we can't store it. It perishes or whatever. Chuck it away. We need to move on to the next job. That's what construction is all about. Next job. We've charged for it. We don't need it. Throw it away. And that theme has spanned my entire career, and it's really irritated me. Right up until the building at Red Kite, the amount of waste that was generated from that was unbelievable. And on the flip side, the cost of building materials is sky high. I find when we're doing maintenance work in our schools, that the cost of materials, if you want to do anything in-house, is really, really expensive. I talk to a lot of building contractors. They're in exactly the same boat. They go do a domestic job, and the customers are sucking their teeth in because they think the builder's got a yacht somewhere moored and a Ferrari at home. His rates are the same. It's just that he's having to charge more for the materials. Yeah. So what I've come up with, which is in development at the moment, which seems to have got quite a lot of traction.
Is this an exclusive?
Probably. Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
An exclusive, I love it.
You heard it here first. Is a concept called book-she. Now, book-she is a term which I heard, again, back on site in my teenage years, of something that is not used. Book-she is a term. Apparently, it's an old Arab term that ended up somehow in Yorkshire. I don't know if it's colloquial or not. But book-she is that book-she? Is that not needed?
Right. Okay.
So book-she is a service, an app, which allows contractors to sell and exchange and buy used or unused building materials. Almost like Vinted, but for the construction industry.
Yep.
And I've tried to engage successfully a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 contractors, because at the end of the day, they're the biggest contributors to the amount of waste that the construction industry produces in this country. And they have a duty to try and improve as much as they can their sustainability targets. A lot of them are government backed. And I've explained the concept to all of them, or a lot of them, and it's been resoundingly positive. And they have expressed the desire to have a platform that they can place some of these high quality building materials that they're not using to make available to be repurposed within the construction industry. A lot of mid-tier contractors find it appealing because they can pick up high quality building materials at a vastly reduced rate. It's not about making money for these big tier 1 contractors. It's about making sure that the stuff doesn't end up in a skip. It'll allow them to generate a small amount of funds because they can then use that for community projects or charity, or you can keep it in-house, as a reward for the staff that have improved their sustainability. Mid-tier contractors, smaller contractors, one-man bands can pick up really inexpensive building materials at really, really cheap rates, and start coming back down to pre-2020 prices, more reasonable prices, right down to the DIYer, like me and you who want to do something. I moved into my house in 2020, did a lot of it needed everything doing to it, did a lot of the refurbishment myself, and saw the price of materials go up back daily in some cases. Me being in the industry and knowing people within the industry, I built a little office at the bottom of my garden and did it entirely through using materials that were over-ordered or not needed. And it looks great. It works perfectly. It's brick construction and it's rendered and it's got a proper roof on it and bifold doors. It looks amazing. It cost me an absolute fraction of what it should have been, just because I knew people who had, there's a bifold door sat in my warehouse. You can take it for 20 quid or something. It's in the way. We've got a pallet of blocks here that we're not using. They're going to end up in skip or get sent back. You can have them for 20 quid or whatever. It's trying to link everybody together. The people that are in the know and are in the construction industry can get access to those materials that it might just be something that they need if they're doing a project at home, a pizza oven or a barbecue or whatever, flagging the driveway. There's some really good gear that ends up going to waste, and it's such a shame. And I think if we can link everybody together, the whole idea of the app is to make sure that the whole construction industry is linked together so that there's an opportunity. It might not always work, but there's an opportunity for someone to say, if you want this, you can have it. If you don't, it's genuine waste. But if you've got a little project around the corner and you want this, it's there. There's a platform that you can use. Obviously, there's eBay and things like that, but people are in that to make money. This isn't about that. It's about the top tier contractors taking responsibility for the amount of waste that they produce and making it available to the rest of the industry. And obviously, we're well in his infancy at the moment. I'm not sort of shouting out my CEO too much, but she's been really understanding in terms of the amount of time I've needed to use to develop this. She understands that it'll be a benefit to our trust as well. So it's I've been working on this probably for the past 12 months. It's an idea that I've had for years, because it's the issue has always annoyed me, basically. And we're getting some real traction within the industry. At the moment, it's all being developed. All sorts of conversations going on that I don't fully understand around native apps and this sort of stuff. And that's all in production. We've got some pretty serious financial backing, and we should be in a position to sort of go live early 2025. Right. The website, I think, is being developed at the moment as we speak as well. So the sort of the buzz around the industry and the problems that we think it's going to resolve are all quite exciting.
Yeah.
It's like anything. It's one of them things where we're gonna try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, at least we've had a go. But there's a real desire, particularly from me, to try and make sure that things aren't going to waste in the construction industry, because it's been going on for too long.
Yeah, it's an incredible idea. If you look at tier one contractors, they've got everybody has social value targets to hit now.
Yeah,
the amount of the amount of waste that's left. You could be talking 20, 30 sheets of plywood on site. But imagine a marketplace, ultimately, that you could just go on and type where it is and you can come and pick it up.
I got told, obviously, whenever I speak to contractors, I always end up with two stories that they tell me off the back of it. When I explain the concept to them, they all give me the exact same two stories. One of them is, crikey, the amount of stuff we chucked away on that last job, didn't we? That you could have built an extension. And the second is, they've always got some weird uncle who was a bit of a skip dipper. It was my uncle would love that, or my granddad would love that. He's always doing stuff in his house, and he'd love something that's cheaply available and what have you. So there's always those two tales. But yeah, one really interesting tale that I got told by a really top level contractor. They were building an office block in London, millions of pounds, and there were these huge 8 foot by 4 foot double glazed units, bronze tinted, nearly £2,000 each, and they had about 18. They changed the specification for whatever. There's all sorts of reasons why waste is produced as well, and I know QSs are trying to cut down as much as they can on what they order, but there's all sorts of reasons as to why waste is produced. And it was a value engineering exercise, I think, and they ended up with these 16 panels left over. Now, what looks like success at the moment is the glass contractor, St Gobain, had an agreement whereby they, for £350 each, they will restock that piece of glass. They will, obviously it's been bespoke made for that particular job, that office block. They will then smash it up, put it in their incinerator and turn it into a new double glazed unit, which at the moment is what's considered a success. By introducing Buckshee into that argument, what you're doing is you're giving a platform for those units to be advertised to perhaps an architect or a local developer or somebody who's developing a barn conversion somewhere and thinks, right, well, they'd look lovely in my extension to my barn conversion or something. Take 4 of those for £150 a piece. I've got £8,000 worth of glazing for £400 or whatever, So not only is that glass being used for its intended purpose as a window, obviously you're aware of it because you can build your openings to suit, but you've avoided that carbon-rich recycling process where you've had to smash it up and incinerate it and turn it into a new double glazed unit. Plus, the contractor's avoided the £350 restocking fee, and he's made £150 on the unit, so he's £400-500 up. Again, it's not about the money side of it. That's sort of nominal.
Yeah.
It's more about avoiding that carbon process of recycling and making sure that unit is used for its intended purpose, which was a window. Yeah. It's always meant to be a window. So, like I say, it's just about providing a link and providing a platform and an arena for people to say, look, is this any good to anybody?
Yeah.
Because in a really small scale, that's what we used to do on site. You'd see something, this is too good to chuck in the skip. Does anyone want this? I'd be a young lad going around, why are we throwing this away? And it'd be a sink or something. I'd end up with that. In fact, a long time ago, I did this has just come to me now. I did a conversion of some houses in Harrogate, and there were these lovely mock sash timber windows, huge things, great. And the contractor come out, mismeasured one, and brought them all to site. There were one that was mismeasured. And this was early 2000s. And it was just sat there, beautiful window, just sat there. And I thought, I can't throw this away. And I took it home with the permission of the client, of course. And it sat in my garage for about 5 years. And my missus kept saying, what the hell are you doing with that window? And when I joined the academy, this is again part of the reason why academies were a bit unaware about and a bit unprepared for proper estates management. But I ended up building my own office from scratch as an extension to the school. I built my own office, and I needed a window. And that window that was mismeasured from Harrogate 5-6 years ago ended up as a window in my office, and it's still in the Prince Henry's Otley Estates office now.
Is it?
And it cost them nothing. So yeah, that's kind of a little sort of Buckshire origin story.
I love that. The concept's always been there.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. I think it's got lots of legs as this. I work in construction every day. I see it, and I think what you've created is something really special. I'm a massive advocate of it. I've spoken about it, and absolutely it'll be something that we'll be speaking about. But just to move it on, just onto the next part, but the final part really is just really advice from you to other estate managers, other CEOs, other leaders within education. What best practices have you done that have been successful? I think you have touched on it. A little bit, talking about getting ahead of the game and stuff. But if you had to pass advice on to anybody that works in education, what would it be?
I think there's no real vocational path at the moment to becoming an education estates manager, which is a shame. But I think in terms of advice, what I would say is don't worry about your background or what you've done previously. It will always be useful because you end up getting involved in that much, looking after a school building, that whatever you've done in the past, it will always be useful. The biggest bit of advice I would say is the NEBOSH training is brilliant. That's superb. I think that's about a 2-week course or something. That's
FIRE?
No, NEBOSH General Certificate.
Okay.
It's like a really broad-ranging health and safety and statutory maintenance course that's really useful. NEBOSH General Certificate, I think it's called. I did that quite late, but found it really, really useful. That's a brilliant sort of proper educational course to go on if you really want to progress in the field. I think that's being looked at more and more in terms of recruiting and things. But the biggest bit of advice I think I would probably say is find a structure that works for all of your schools, and that you can adapt to it, and just stick to your principles, because you are not fighting against, but trying to convince people who, I'm the only in my organisation. I'm the only one with any sort of construction experience, and I'm not the best, by a long stretch. I'm still picking stuff up all the time. So never think that you are the best or you've learned everything, because the landscape's ever changing as well. But just try and make sure that you're adaptable and that you can find yourself a structure that's tried and tested. People more than welcome to borrow mine. I've sent it out across a load of schools, but something that's simple, that works for the people in the building and achieves what you want to achieve, which is keeping the users of the building safe, warm and well lit. Yeah, lovely, mate. Well, look, that's going to end it. Thank you for coming on. Been a pleasure. Thanks, mate. Good to see you. Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you'd love to be a guest on here, please drop me an email at dn@charlesgarth.com. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.